So we're up in Scotland. It's day one of part 2 of E-Coating. I love this part of the test because it's where everything starts to come together. We got a very good idea of how all the cars performed on track. We've whittled it down to our favourite 8 of those 16, and it's quite a change of pace because obviously we're driving on the road, so you're looking for different qualities in the cars, and possibly more of their character comes out rather than just their outright performance.
We whittled the 16 down to our final 8. It's a great group, I have to say, this year. The nice thing is, yes, we've got all the big hitters with the Ferrari and the McLaren and the Porsche and the Lamborghini. We've also got the hot hatches here, so we've got the Yaris and we've got the Civic, and then there's cars in the middle as well, so the Cayman and the M2 CS, so it's a really broad spectrum.
There's a real spectacle to it. Just driving from the hotel this morning, heading up here, you've got the sun coming up and the spray and the clouds and amazing scenery, and that, to me, that's a big part of what E-Coat is about, because it's just this gathering of quite disparate but all really exciting cars. So yeah, very much looking forward to the next few days.
I missed out in Wales, so I didn't get to go to the track. I've driven hardly any of these cars, so all I've driven in the past is the Ferrari F8, which I loved, and the Civic Type R, which is fantastic, I guess the benchmark hot hatch, but everything else is new to me.
Yeah, the road's always a lot different. Track is very binary, you're steering hard and braking hard, and you're expecting the grip to do all the work. The road is much different, it's more subtle, more nuanced.
Yeah, it's a different challenge driving on the road, I think, because you get different sensations and the surfaces are changing, and cambers and bumps and crests and all the things that you don't get on a racetrack.
This is sort of the real world. This is to see whether these cars can do it on the road, which is where the majority of people will drive them. So it's going to be an interesting week.
Again, trying not to preempt which ones are going to shine, but I drove up in the Ferrari yesterday, and already that feels like it's going to be one of the cars that's up there because it does everything so well.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting with something like the 765 LT on these roads. It's shone on track. It's whether McLaren's sort of DNA of being a really good fluid road car comes to the fore.
This M2 CS on track was hilarious, but of course you can't drive it in any way, shape or form like that on the road. So you're looking for different things from that car.
I was very, very fond of the M2 CS, just because that's very much my kind of car almost.
The M2 CS just seems to be perfectly proportioned for UK roads, and that's getting a lot of attention from us at the moment, and people grabbing the keys and taking it off. So yeah, it's proven to fall into place as we expected it to do, sort of on the first day out on the road, and I'm sure everything will change again later on this afternoon.
So I've just had my first drive on the road in the 765 Longtail, and that's quite an experience in itself, so I'm just trying to digest that at the moment. It's not as intimidating as you think it might be, not if you're just driving it normally. It's loud, it's pretty harsh, both in terms of noise and also the vibration of the engine, but the ride as well at low speed is obviously pretty firm, as you'd expect. Smooths out and gets really good as the speed rises, which is the sort of the classic style of the McLaren proactive chassis control. But yeah, it's a quite a physical experience at low speed.
Yeah, standout cars. I think probably the most memorable drive I've had so far is in the 911 Turbo. Had a good sort of 20-minute run, and being out here, there's no other traffic apart from us, so you can just get into a rhythm and get to know the road and stretch the performance of the cars a little bit. And it was wet and dry, which is perfect conditions for the Turbo, so it really came into its own then. I think you do find, compared to the track, there's a Lamborghini going off in the background, I think compared to the track you realise how little of their full performance you actually can use on the road, which is frustrating at times, but actually it's just all part of the experience of these cars, really.
911 Turbo is always intriguing. It's funny, people only care about GT3s and GT2s and RSs, but the Turbo's been so good for so long. I hear it was fantastic on track, which doesn't surprise me because the 991 was as well. So yeah, I'm sure that'll be a spaceship, and if it rains, 911 Turbos tend to do pretty well.
I'm yet to really drive the Porsches today. I drove the Cayman here this morning. That was great, but I don't think I'm ever going to make peace with the long gear ratios. We're just waiting for the Yaris to arrive now. That's the one that I just really want to get in on this road is the Yaris. So hopefully that should be here any moment now, and we can crack on with that.
We've all been drawn to the mid-engine supercars, so we've just been talking about sort of the differences between those. The Lamborghini has surprised, I think, quite a few people. The engine is just fantastic. But then you've got the chassis of the Ferrari. The Ferrari sounds so much quieter after you jump out of the Lambo. Sort of, and it's not just because its paint jobs are a bit more sort of demure, but and then you've got the McLaren, which is the sort of stealthiest one, but also almost the angriest looking of the lot. Yeah, it's been interesting comparing all three of those.
Probably too early to think of favourites or cars that are leading yet. A few of us are quite bowled over by the Lamborghini, not just because it's sort of extrovert character of how it looks, but its V10 engine is a masterpiece. It's a real work of art and really addictive, particularly up here. You can just hear it echoing around the forest.
And I think everybody seems to be really charmed by the Lamborghini. I think the sort of sonic warfare that is unleashing on Scotland is capturing quite a lot of hearts. It'd be really interesting to see how it compares with the Ferrari, because the Ferrari is not really any slower. I mean, it's also extremely powerful, but they go about their tasks in a very different way.
The hot hatches definitely still have a chance, yes. One of the fantastic things, obviously, on the road, you can't really use all the performance of a supercar, so it's a very levelling factor, I suppose, in that. And I'm sure at some point, because it's Scotland, we'll get some rain, and that's also something that they all have to deal with. And trying to put 700 brake horsepower down suddenly doesn't seem quite such a good idea sometimes. So.
We're at the end of day one now, on the edge of Kielder Forest. It's been a bit of an eye-opener for us with some of the cars. Mentioned earlier, the Lamborghini is really coming into our affections, and the Yaris GR4 has arrived this afternoon. This homologation special is right on the money for us. It's the right specification, four-wheel drive, wonderful turbocharged engine, which you wouldn't expect. It's got real character, and the whole car looks like a ball of energy. So we're looking forward to getting more time in that tomorrow. And also things like the Ferrari and the Civic Type R on the road really sort of coming to the fore again and exciting people. The Civic Type R particularly, it's only, Honda say, a midlife facelift, but there's so much they've done to that car that to get more time, to get under the skin of it, is going to be imperative tomorrow.
Day 2 in sunny Scotland, or well, hopefully sunny. It looks like the weather might be coming in a bit, but we had such a good day yesterday that we can't begrudge the weather a bit of rain if it wants to. And the Yaris is now here. I drove it a little bit yesterday afternoon when it turned up.
The GR Yaris, has there been a more eagerly awaited car than this one? I'm almost a little bit worried that that sense of anticipation might overhype the car. It's very fast. It's faster than I thought it would be. It has just over 250 brake horsepower and it is a small car, sure, but the way it rips through the gears, the gearing is really well judged as well, the way it just blasts through the gears is really exhilarating. It feels easily able to keep up with any of the cars here, even the supercars.
It's a hilarious little thing. I mean, it's cartoonish in its proportions, particularly if you follow it down the road and just see there's massive rear track on it. And it kind of drives like it looks. So it's just mega short wheelbase and lots of grip, but really sort of tough. It feels like a sort of homologation special to that extent in terms of the gear shift and the really punchy engine. So it's nice to have that in the mix and sort of ducking and diving with all the supercars now as well.
I've steeled myself and had a go in the McLaren, and it has absolutely sublime steering. So that's now bubbled up to the top of my list as well, along with just about everything else. So it's going to be quite tricky to pick out what is actually the best car here, because there's a lot of different cars, but they're all very good at what they're trying to do. So you've got the Civic, which is a very good hot hatch.
Surprises for me, Civic Type R, I think. I was never fallen in love with that car. Everyone's raved about it and I've always sort of admired it, but from a distance somehow. But I really like whatever they've done to this one. It feels more fluid, just as precise, a bit more playful at the rear. The engine seems to have a bit more top end to it. I just think it's great fun.
I joined the group a little bit later this morning, so I had a really nice run up on my own in the Cayman, which I think I'd overlooked probably because there's so many extreme shapes and noises and they're just more full-on cars that the more rounded, familiar car you tend to kind of put to the background, but it's so good, which is really annoying because then it throws another consideration, I think, when you get used to that really shouty Lamborghini or absolute rocket ship turbo, and then you get in the Cayman and it just does everything so well and it gives you so many options and you can drive it smoothly or drive it aggressively. It's a real reminder how good the car is and why it generally does so well in these tests.
I had an amazing drive in the BMW, the M2 CS. There's a fantastic piece of road down in the valley down there, and that's just a lovely car that, again, like I was saying, you don't have to be driving it super quickly, it just flows and it feels rear-wheel drive, and the gearbox seems to be getting better and better as well. It's a distinctly BMW gearbox. I think anybody that has felt the BMW manual gearbox over the last 30 years, you could be blindfolded, sit in the car, and you'd instantly know what it was.
Well, it's Wednesday afternoon now and we're working our way westwards. We've come to one of our favourite roads in border country. Unfortunately, the cafe we normally go to is shut today for obvious reasons, but the road is as good as ever.
The afternoon of day 2 in the Scottish part of Evo Car of the Year, or Muck-Coty as it was sometimes christened. And we've moved location, so we're now next to a couple of rather beautiful locks. And one of the things I love about Evo Car of the Year is the fact we do roam around a bit, and sometimes the best drives are actually the ones between locations.
I've been speaking to all the other judges, and I think everyone's moving in roughly the same sort of direction. I think there are some that are sort of dropping a few red herrings here and there, but I think most people, probably the second half of their order is beginning to take shape. I think everyone as a whole actually is struggling with that top four.
So this year I think the major theme amongst all the judges, including myself, is confusion, because normally we have one or two cars that really stand out, and this year we really don't. They're all really good, and the more you drive, the less clarity you feel, because each one you jump in is just a reminder of how good that particular car is.
Don't know whether I should give too much away at the moment, but I think the Porsches are struggling. I think the Yaris is really impressing people, as is the Civic. The Lambo remains really strong. The McLaren is just ballistic, and I think that will be right up there.
The scoring system for Evo, is the sensible thing to do in a way would be to just simply rank everything, so from first place down to 8th place, but you can end up with ties and all sorts of things, and it feels slightly wrong sometimes, because actually two cars you think, oh, I simply can't separate them. So what we tend to do is give every car a score out of 100. If something gets below 70, 75, probably shouldn't have been here in the first place. That's not going to happen this year. Anything above 90 has to be kind of really the best of the best.
So we're at the end of day 2, it's getting dark, it's getting a bit cold, but I started the day thinking I'd be much clearer on how the cars sat, but the more I've driven them, the more, not confused, but it's very, very, very hard to decide between certainly the Lamborghini, the Ferrari and the McLaren. They're all trying to do the same thing, but they all do it in totally different ways. So I think you have more instant fun, say in the Lamborghini, but it's not as polished and quick a car as the McLaren, and the Ferrari sits somewhere in between. So every time I've driven them, it's just mixed all that up. So I need to have a think about it, probably have an argument with Jethro, because he loves the Lamborghini and I do love it, but perhaps not as much as a couple of the others. Before the end of the day, we've got one more drive back to the hotel, have a few beers, have a chat, probably have a row, but it's all part of the process, and tomorrow it tees us up for one final drive in all the cars, and we'll come to our conclusions.
So it's the final day today, and we have to make a decision on our Ecoty car of the year. It's going to be so tight. These cars are so competitive and so tightly matched on everything. Every time you drive something, you think this is in with the shout, and we've been saying that over the last 3 or 4 days, and the fact that we're still saying that on the final day highlights how competitive it is this year. I think a few of us have got an order of cars we'd like to see in the top 3, or we think are top 3 contenders, but how we make those into a first, second and third is going to be really tough.
Last night we tried to get some uniformity with the judges as to a top 4, so that we could concentrate on the right cars to mop up the last of the photography this morning. And it did work, so we've got a top 4, we just don't necessarily have the order of that top 4, but it's Yaris, Lamborghini, M2 and McLaren. I think looking at the scores that the judges have given, or the nominations I should say, the Lamborghini is the weakest, and I suspect that might be our 4th place car, so it really is between the other 3. I couldn't call it at the moment.
Yeah, the Cayman. On its own, it would have been, it's a 5-star car. It's a proper, really well sorted bit of kit, but it just, against the opposition here, its steering doesn't feel quite so sharp. The handling is a little bit soft-edged at time when you want it to be a bit sharp. But then again, I drove it here this morning and the road flows really nicely, nicely surfaced, and it's fantastic, and it grips so well, as we've discovered in the past on a wet circuit. It's phenomenal.
The reason that I think the Turbo S was at the bottom was probably it suffers from the fact that it's such a good all-rounder in a way. You know, it's still fabulous, and you still get into it every time and be shocked by just how agile the front end was. But it has gained in weight over the years, and that's really tells, I think, on some of these roads. Just doesn't, you know, quite have the alacrity of some of the other lighter cars, perhaps. The Civic, that's an injustice right there. I mean, that should have been further up as far as I was concerned. I think that's a fabulous car. It's all the control weightings are brilliant. I think perhaps it's a car that maybe subconsciously you'd find it hard to own, or it's almost so good that when you get out of it you don't remember it doesn't have any standout qualities as to why it's so good. So perhaps that's the reason. I don't know. I love the Civic, so I find that one harder to judge.
Ferrari, yeah. It's almost too bright. The response is too bright, and the brakes, again, they're a little bit oversensitive, I think. I'm not sure whether they've tweaked the pads between the two halves of the test, but it just feels it's very hard to modulate just the step-in braking, just that little, you know, these are all the nuances that come out on the road that you probably don't realise, you know, are important when you're on the track.
What I look for in these cars is that you, as the driver, the whole point to me, you as the driver can make a difference to what the car does. So you feel like an integral part of how it gets down the road. And the M2 is the ultimate version of that. It's such a front engine rear wheel drive car, always feels on the edge of oversteer, but really well poised, lovely control.
So we've made it to the end of Ecoty, and we have a finishing order. And the top three is the Lamborghini Huracán Evo rear-wheel drive, the McLaren 765 LT, and BMW's M2 CS.
So yeah, for a top three, I think, you know, any one of them could have won, but I'm quite pleased that the M2 got it.
So overall, I think M2 is definitely a worthy winner. I love it. I think it's fantastic. I wish that I was able to place it ahead of a McLaren. I couldn't quite bring myself to do it. I wanted the cheap car to win. It's still like 75 grand, but yeah, McLaren's a spaceship. M2 CS is fantastic, and 2020 was a great year. So pretty fair result all round.
Yeah, so that's it. We're done. 3 days driving. Top three decided, which is good news. I'm surprised actually that the McLaren didn't win, not just because I had it on the top of my list, but just from the conversations that we had last night.
In terms of the scoring, it's one of the closest we've had for 21, 22 years we've been doing Ecoty. The top two was separated by a point, and it was so close from there on down. Third, fourth, fifth were all really close. They all could have made the podium. The Lamborghini was a big surprise in this test. We've driven them lots before, the Huracans, and they've never quite really been the driver's cars we've hoped for. They're frustrated with their steering, hasn't quite had that feel that we're after. The ride hasn't quite been great to get the performance out of it, but with this latest rear-wheel drive version, they've really sourced it. It's like a completely new car rather than just an evolution.
And it so nearly came second, and to be honest, I think it would have been in with a chance of winning if it had an individual mode where you could tailor settings like exhaust, damping and steering and so forth to your own preferences. They do that on some of their other cars. If only they did it with that car, because I think if they did, it would be getting on pretty close to perfection, and I really think it would have been in with a chance with winning this year. Still, as it is, it's a remarkable car, and I think perhaps more than anything else, it's a true supercar. It just has that theatre, has that incredible want one aura about it.
In second place is McLaren's 765 LT, another fantastic product from the team down at Woking, and this third LT car from them is just spectacular. It looks like a track car, and on track it was amazing, as you've seen, but on the road it just comes to you and it just gives you so much confidence. It's got wonderful steering, the best steering here, the best steering we've driven in a road car for a long time.
And the carbon tub is stunning, but it's so drivable as well. You know, in the wet, it's got a fantastic traction control system. But even when you turn that off, as we found out down at Anglesey, it moves around and it's not spiky. It's just a fabulous thing.
Our Evo car of the year for 2020 is the BMW M2 CS. Personally, I'm absolutely delighted at that because I think it's a great car. I didn't put it top of my list, I put it at second, but I think its secret of its success was that everyone loved it who drove it.
And then the winner, which was also my winner, which is something of a rarity, I think, in Evo car of the year, the BMW M2 CS, which is just a fabulous car in so many respects. It has that thing of being brilliant at all speeds. Still stunningly quick. It's got such a smooth engine, but it's also got a fabulous manual gear shift. It's, again, like I was saying with the Lamborghini, it's even more sort of basic. If you're drawing up the idea of almost the perfect car, you've got multi-cylinder engine at the front, power going to the rear wheels, then the slip diff, manual gearbox. What more do you need?
The normal answer would be you'll take the winner home, the M2 CS, but actually this is what we've all been saying. We'd be happy with any of these cars, and if we knew anyone who bought one of these off the back of eCoachy, you'd sort of admire them and also be jealous of which one they have, whether it was the 911 Turbo or the M2 CS. I voted for the Yaris Top as my favourite car. I think that's just spectacular. It's a car we've been asking manufacturers to build. Toyota went out and built it, and they've hit the nail on the head. That was wonderful. So if I could take one car home, I'd like to take that one home, but if you gave me the keys to any of them, I'd be more than happy.
Ego-wise, you'd want to smoke around in a McLaren, but in reality, I'd be very, very happy in the Toyota.
Which one I'd take home? I'd take home the M2 CS. It was my winner, it's the winner overall, and that's one of the things I think when it comes down to judging, when you're trying to separate all these cars, it's right, you've got the choice of all these keys in front of you, which one are you going to take? And yeah, for me it would be the winner, it would be the BMW.
I would take home, obviously I can afford all of them, and I've decided that I would buy probably a 15-year-old Renault Clio Trophy, which is what I have waiting for me at home. But otherwise, I'd take the McLaren, please.
I had great drives in all of them. They've all got plenty going for them. I am going to drive home in the M2 because that's what I'm delivering back to the office. So, yeah, couldn't get better, really, could it?
Fresh air and driving, boys. It's hard work, you know. It looks easy.